I remember the morning it all began. It was not dramatic. There were no loud voices or slammed doors. Just a quiet realization that settled into my chest like cold water. I was standing in my bedroom. The sun had barely risen. The light fell across my dresser where my jewelry sat in neat velvet boxes. Gold. Diamonds. Pieces collected over decades. Pieces that told stories of love and celebration and milestones I had earned. But that morning I did not reach for them. I reached instead for the simplest clothes I owned. A plain cotton sari. Faded blue. No embroidery. No shimmer. The kind a woman wears when she has nowhere important to go and no one important to impress. I stood in front of the mirror and barely recognized myself. Gone was the woman who commanded rooms with her presence. Gone were the carefully chosen accessories that spoke of status and respect. What remained was just a woman. Aging. Ordinary. Invisible. And that was exactly what I wanted. You see, I had been thinking about this for weeks. Maybe months. The idea had grown slowly like a shadow lengthening across a wall as the sun sets. I had watched her. My daughter-in-law. The woman my son brought into our home with so much pride and hope. The woman who smiled so beautifully during the wedding. Who touched my feet with such grace. Who called me mother with a voice so sweet it could melt stone. But I had also noticed something else. The way her smile changed depending on who was in the room. The way her voice softened for my son but hardened for the housemaid. The way she greeted my wealthy friends with such enthusiasm but barely nodded at the gardener or the cook. It was subtle. So subtle that I wondered if I was imagining it. If I was being unfair. If I was one of those mothers who could never accept any woman as good enough for her son. But then I started paying closer attention. I watched how she treated the flower vendor who came to our gate each morning. The old woman with bent shoulders who sold jasmine and roses. My daughter-in-law would take the flowers without a word. Without a smile. She would inspect them like they were contaminated. She would bargain aggressively even though the cost was already so small. I watched how she spoke to the young man who delivered groceries. She never said thank you. She never acknowledged his effort. She would simply take the bags and close the door. And I watched how she behaved when guests visited. Especially guests who held influence. Politicians. Business owners. Relatives with money and power. For them her warmth was endless. Her hospitality overflowed. She would serve tea with her own hands. Laugh at their jokes. Ask about their lives with genuine seeming interest. But when my old school friend visited, a retired teacher who lived modestly, a woman with no wealth or status, my daughter-in-law barely spent 10 minutes in the room. She made excuses. She disappeared into the kitchen. She sent the maid to serve instead. I saw it all. And it troubled me deeply. Because respect should not be a currency we spend only on those who can pay us back. Kindness should not be a performance we put on for an audience. Humanity should not be conditional. So I decided to test her. Not out of cruelty. Not out of suspicion for its own sake. But because I needed to know. I needed to see who she really was when she thought no one important was watching. I needed to know if my son had married a woman of character or a woman of convenience. And so that morning I dressed like someone she would not respect. Someone she would not fear. Someone she would not bother to impress. I left my jewelry behind. I left my expensive saris folded in the cupboard. I left behind every visible marker of who I was. I became invisible. The plan was simple. I would visit her at a time when my son was away at work. I would arrive unannounced. I would see how she treated me when she believed I was just an ordinary older woman with no power and no influence. I told no one. Not my son. Not my relatives. Not even the driver. I took a taxi that morning. The driver looked at me through the rearview mirror with mild disinterest. He did not recognize me as the woman he usually drove in silk saris and gold bangles. Good, I thought. The disguise was working. As we drove through the city, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Anxiety. Sadness. Curiosity. And beneath it all a deep ache. Because part of me hoped I was wrong. Part of me wanted her to surprise me. To prove that my instincts were mistaken. To show me that her kindness was real and not just a mask she wore. But another part of me, The part that had lived long enough to recognize patterns in people. That part already knew what I would find. We arrived at the house just before noon. It was the home I had bought for my son and his wife. A beautiful 2-story structure with a garden in front and large windows that let in the light. I had furnished it myself. Chosen every piece of art on the walls. Every cushion on the sofa. It had been my gift to them. A place to start their life together. And now I was about to enter it as a stranger. I paid the taxi driver and stood at the gate for a moment. My heart was beating faster than I expected. My hands felt cold despite the warm weather. I reminded myself why I was doing this. For my son. For the truth. For the future of this family. I rang the doorbell. There was a pause. Then footsteps. Light and quick. The door opened. And there she was. My daughter-in-law stood in the doorway wearing a stylish kurta and jeans. Her hair was tied back neatly. Her skin glowed with expensive creams. She looked fresh and lovely. But her expression when she saw me was something else entirely. Her eyes swept over me from head to toe, taking in my plain sari, my bare neck, my simple sandals. And in that single glance I saw it. Dismissal. She did not recognize me. Not as her mother-in-law. Not as anyone important. To her I was just another old woman. Probably a distant relative. Possibly a beggar. Certainly no one worth her time. Hello, she said. Her tone was flat. Borderless. Hello, Beta, I replied softly. I used the word beta. Child. A term of affection. She did not smile. What do you want, she asked. Not who are you. Not how can I help. Just what do you want? As if I were selling something. As if I were an interruption. I came to see you, I said gently. I wanted to visit. She frowned slightly. Do I know you? I am family, I said. Not a lie. Just not the whole truth. She stared at me for another moment. I could see her mind working. Calculating. Trying to place me. Trying to decide if I was worth letting inside. Finally she stepped back. But only barely. Come in, she said without warmth. I entered the house I had gifted. She did not offer me a seat. She stood in the middle of the living room with her arms crossed looking at me with obvious impatience. So what is this about, she asked. I just wanted to see how you were doing, I said. I heard you were living here now. I thought I would visit. Her eyes narrowed. Who told you about me? Family talks, I said simply. She did not look pleased. Look, I am busy today, she said bluntly. I have things to do. If you need something specific, just tell me. I felt the first sting of it then. The coldness. The lack of basic courtesy. But I kept my face calm. I do not need anything, I said. I just thought it would be nice to spend some time together. She let out a small sigh. The kind of sigh people make when they are annoyed but trying to be polite. Okay, fine, she said. Sit if you want. But I cannot spend much time. I have an appointment later. She gestured vaguely toward the sofa. Then she turned and walked toward the kitchen without offering me water. Without asking if I needed anything. I sat down slowly. The sofa was the one I had chosen. Soft cream fabric with embroidered cushions. It felt strange sitting here as a guest in a home I had created. From the kitchen I could hear her moving around. The clink of dishes. The sound of the refrigerator opening and closing. She was not preparing anything for me. Minutes passed. She returned holding a glass of juice for herself. She sat across from me and took a sip. She did not offer me anything. So she said, "Which side of the family are you from?" "Your husband's side," I said. She nodded slowly, still trying to figure me out. "What is your name?" I gave her a common name. Something forgettable. She did not react. Did not recognize it. "And you live nearby?" she asked. "Not too far," I said. Another silence. She looked at her phone. Scrolled briefly. Then looked back at me. "So is there something you need help with?" she asked again. More pointed this time. "Money or something?" The question hit me like a slap. She assumed I was here to ask for money. "No, Beta," I said quietly. "I do not need money. I just wanted to meet you." She looked skeptical. "People do not just visit for no reason," she said. "Some people do," I replied. Some people visit because they care. She gave a short laugh. It was not kind. Well, I do not really have time for random visits, she said. If you are not here for anything specific, then I think we should wrap this up. I felt my chest tighten. This was the woman my son spoke of with such love. The woman he called thoughtful and caring. The woman he believed was the perfect partner. And here she was treating an older woman with nothing but coldness and suspicion simply because that older woman did not look wealthy or important. I stood up slowly. I understand, I said. I will not take more of your time. She stood as well. Relieved. Okay then, she said. Take care. She walked me to the door. Opened it. Waited for me to leave. As I stepped outside, I turned back to look at her one more time. Thank you for letting me in, I said. She nodded. Already closing the door. Sure. And just like that I was outside again. The door shut behind me with a soft click. I stood there on the steps for a long moment. The sun was bright overhead. The garden was blooming. Everything looked beautiful. But I felt cold. Because now I knew. The woman my son had married was not who she pretended to be. She was kind only to those who mattered. Respectful only to those who had power. Warm only to those who could give her something in return. To everyone else she was indifferent. Dismissive. Cold. And that broke my heart. Not because of how she treated me, but because of what it meant for my son. For our family. For the values I had tried so hard to instill. I walked slowly down the path and out through the gate. I did not call a taxi right away. I just walked. I needed to think. I needed to decide what to do next. Because now that I knew the truth, I could not unknow it. And I could not let it continue. But I also could not simply tell my son. He would not believe me. He would think I was being unfair. Jealous. Overprotective. No. I needed him to see it for himself. I needed her to reveal herself. And I needed to be smart about how I did this. Because this was not just about proving I was right. This was about protecting my son from a life built on pretense and superficiality. This was about teaching a lesson that needed to be learned. And this was about standing up for every invisible person who had ever been dismissed simply because they did not look important enough. So as I walked through the streets that afternoon, I made a decision. This test was not over. It was only beginning. To understand what happened next, you need to know how we got here. You need to know the story of how my son met her. How they fell in love. How she entered our lives with all the grace of a bride in a fairy tale. It started 3 years ago. My son Arjun had just turned 30. He was working at a successful firm. Doing well. Independent. Respectful. Everything a mother could hope for. But he was lonely. I could see it in his eyes. Hear it in the silence when he came home at night. He would eat dinner with me and we would talk about his day, but there was always something missing. He wanted a partner. A companion. Someone to share his life with. And I wanted that for him too. So when his friend introduced him to her, I was hopeful. Her name was Kavya. She came from a good family. Educated. Well-spoken. Beautiful. The first time Arjun brought her home to meet me, she was perfect. She wore a simple salwar kameez in soft pink. Her hair was neatly braided. She carried a small box of sweets as a gift. And when she entered our home, she touched my feet and called me mother with such warmth that I felt my heart open to her immediately. She sat with me for over an hour that first day. She asked about my life. My interests. My health. She listened when I spoke. She laughed at my stories. She even helped me in the kitchen without being asked. I remember thinking, this is the one. This is the girl my son deserves. Arjun was glowing. I had never seen him so happy. He looked at her the way a man looks at the center of his universe. And she looked back at him with what seemed like equal adoration. They spent the next few months getting to know each other. Meeting for coffee. Going to movies. Talking late into the night on the phone. And every time she came to visit me, she was lovely. She brought gifts. Small thoughtful things. A shawl because I had mentioned feeling cold. A book because I had said I loved reading. Jasmine flowers because she knew they were my favorite. She would sit with me and ask about my past. About my late husband. About how I had raised Arjun on my own after his father passed away. She seemed genuinely interested. genuinely caring. And I began to love her, not just as the woman my son had chosen, but as a daughter, as someone I looked forward to seeing, someone I trusted. So when Arjun told me he wanted to marry her, I gave my blessing without hesitation. The wedding was beautiful. We kept it simple, just close family and friends. But it was filled with joy and laughter and hope. Kavya looked radiant in her red bridal sari. She cried during the ceremony. Happy tears, she said. She held my hand and told me she felt so lucky to be joining our family. I believed her. After the wedding, they moved into the house I had arranged for them. I wanted them to have their own space, their own life. I did not want to be the overbearing mother-in-law who insisted they live with me. But I visited often, and they visited me. At first everything seemed perfect. Kavya was attentive, respectful. She called me every few days. She invited me over for meals. She asked for my advice on decorating the house and managing the household. And when I was there, she treated me well. She made my favorite tea. She asked about my day. She smiled and laughed and made me feel welcome. But slowly, very slowly, I started to notice small things. It began with the way she spoke to the help. One afternoon I was visiting and the maid came in to serve tea. She was a young girl, probably 19 or 20. She had been working for them for only a few weeks. She placed the tray on the table carefully, but her hand shook slightly and one of the cups rattled in its saucer. Kavya looked up sharply. Can you not do anything properly? She snapped. The girl flinched. Sorry, madam, she whispered. Kavya waved her hand dismissively. Just go. I will serve it myself. The girl hurried out of the room. Her face flushed with embarrassment. I looked at Kavya. She was already smiling again as if nothing had happened. That tea is always better when you make it yourself, she said lightly. I did not respond. I felt uncomfortable, but I told myself maybe she was just having a bad day. Maybe the girl had made mistakes before. Maybe I was reading too much into it. But then it happened again. A few weeks later I was there when the cook came to ask a question about the grocery list. He was an older man. Polite. Experienced. Kavya barely looked at him. Just get whatever is needed, she said impatiently. Do I have to decide everything? The man nodded and left quietly. Again I said nothing, but I felt a small knot forming in my stomach. Then there was the incident with my old friend Lakshmi. Lakshmi had been my companion for decades. We had taught at the same school, raised our children during the same years, shared our joys and sorrows. She was retired now, living on a pension. She did not have much, but she had a heart full of love and a spirit full of life. I invited her to visit one afternoon. I wanted her to meet Kavya properly, to spend time together. When Lakshmi arrived, Kavya greeted her politely enough, but I could see the subtle shift in her demeanor. Her smile was thinner. Her warmth was muted. She served tea, but she did not sit with us. She excused herself after only a few minutes, saying she had work to do upstairs. Lakshmi and I sat together talking for over an hour. Kavya did not come back down. When Lakshmi left, I asked Kavya if everything was all right. Oh yes, she said brightly. I just had some things to finish. But I had seen her. I had seen her scrolling on her phone, watching television. She had not been busy. She simply had not wanted to spend time with someone she considered unimportant. I began to watch more carefully after that. And the more I watched, the more I saw. She was charming with Arjun's colleagues when they visited. She was delightful with my wealthy relatives. She was gracious with anyone who had status or influence. But with everyone else she was different. Curt with shopkeepers. Dismissive with delivery workers. Impatient with anyone she saw as beneath her. And yet she hid it so well. Whenever Arjun was around, she was perfect. Sweet. Thoughtful. Kind. He saw none of what I saw. To him she was everything he had hoped for. And I began to feel a terrible loneliness. Because I could see the truth. But I had no proof. No way to show him without sounding like a bitter mother-in-law. So I stayed silent. I smiled when she smiled. I praised her when Arjun asked how I felt about her. I played the role of the happy, supportive mother. But inside I was troubled. I started asking subtle questions. I spoke to the maid one day when Kavya was out. I asked her gently how she liked working there. The girl hesitated. Then she said it was fine. But I saw the shadow in her eyes. I spoke to the cook. He said the same. It is fine, madam. But his voice was flat. I even spoke to the flower vendor. The old woman who sold jasmine at the gate. She looked at me with tired eyes and said, your daughter-in-law does not like to pay fair prices. I felt my heart sink. This was not the woman I thought I knew. This was someone who performed goodness but did not live it. And I realized something painful. My son was living in a home built on politeness and pretend. A home where love was conditional. Where respect was transactional. Where kindness was a costume worn only for the right audience. And he did not even know it. I thought about saying something. Sitting him down. Telling him what I had observed. But I knew how it would sound. He would think I was jealous. Overreacting. Unable to let him go. He would defend her. And rightly so. Because she had never shown him this side of herself. So I decided I needed a different approach. I needed evidence. I needed him to see with his own eyes. And that is when the idea began to form. What if I stopped being the mother-in-law? What if I became invisible? What if I saw how she treated people who had nothing to offer her? What if I became one of those people? It was risky. It was painful. But it was the only way. Because I could not let my son spend his life with someone who only loved him because of what he could provide. I could not let him build a future with someone whose heart was hollow. So I began to plan. And that plan led me to that morning when I dressed in plain clothes and stood at the door of my son's house as a stranger. Now you understand why I did it. Not out of spite. Not out of control. But out of love. And out of a desperate need for truth. The days after that first visit were heavy. I could not stop thinking about the way she looked at me. The coldness in her voice. The complete absence of basic hospitality. It played over and over in my mind like a film I could not turn off. But I also knew that one visit was not enough. People have bad days. People get distracted. I needed to be fair. I needed to give her another chance. So I decided to return. This time I waited a week. I chose a different day. A different time. I wanted to see if her behavior was consistent or if I had simply caught her at a wrong moment. I dressed the same way. Plain cotton sari. No jewelry. No makeup. Just an invisible older woman. I took a taxi again. The driver did not recognize me. Good. As we drove I felt that same mix of hope and dread. Part of me still wanted to be wrong. But deep down I knew I was not. We arrived in the late morning. The sun was high and warm. The street was quiet. I stood at the gate and took a breath. Then I rang the bell. Footsteps. The door opened. And there she was again. This time she was wearing a casual top and leggings. Her hair was loose. She looked relaxed. Comfortable. But the moment she saw me her expression changed. Not surprise. Not recognition. Just irritation. You again, she said flatly. Yes, Beta, I said gently. I came to see you. She crossed her arms. Why? I was in the area, I said. I thought I would stop by. She let out a long sigh. Look, I told you last time. I do not have time for random visits. I do not even know who you are really. I am family, I reminded her softly. She rolled her eyes. Everyone says that. Do you need money? Is that it? The words stung. But I kept my composure. No, I said. I do not need money. I just wanted to spend a little time with you. She shook her head. This is ridiculous. I have things to do. I cannot keep entertaining people just because they show up at my door. She started to close the door. I took a small step forward. Please, I said quietly. Just a few minutes. She paused. Looked at me with barely concealed annoyance. Fine, she said sharply. 5 minutes. Then you leave. She stepped aside just enough for me to enter. I walked in. This time I did not wait for her to offer me a seat. I simply sat down on the sofa. She remained standing. Arms still crossed. Clearly impatient. So what is it this time, she said. I just wanted to talk, I said. About what? About life. About family. About how you are doing. She laughed. It was not a warm sound. You want to talk about how I am doing? You do not even know me. I know you are my son's wife, I said carefully. She frowned. Your son? Yes, I said. She stared at me. Who is your son? I gave her Arjun's name. Her face changed. Confusion flickered across it. Then realization. Then shock. Wait, she said slowly. You are Arjun's mother. Yes, I said. She blinked. Her mouth opened. Then closed. But you look. She stopped herself. But I knew what she was going to say. You look nothing like his mother. Because the mother-in-law she knew wore silk and gold. Carried herself with authority. Commanded respect. This woman in front of her was none of those things. Why are you dressed like this? She asked. Her voice had changed. There was an edge of panic now. I wanted to see you, I said simply. But why like this? I did not answer. I just looked at her. She shifted uncomfortably. Does Arjun know you are here? No, I said. Why not? Because I wanted to visit you alone. She was starting to piece it together now. I could see the gears turning in her mind. The growing realization that something was very wrong. Look, she said. Her tone had shifted. She was trying to sound warmer now. More respectful. If I had known it was you, I would have. Would have what I asked quietly. She hesitated. Would have welcomed you properly. I nodded slowly. So you treat people differently depending on who they are, I said. It was not a question. Her face flushed. No, she said quickly. That is not what I meant. Then what did you mean? She opened her mouth. Closed it again. I did not recognize you, she said weakly. And because you did not recognize me, you treated me with disrespect, I said. I did not. You did not offer me water. You did not offer me a seat. You asked me if I needed money. You made it clear you did not want me here. She looked away. I was busy, she muttered. Too busy to show basic courtesy to an older woman. She did not respond. I stood up slowly. You know what hurts the most, Kavya, I said. It is not that you were rude to me. It is that you did not even see me as a person worth your kindness. You saw someone plain. Someone ordinary. Someone with no power or status. And you decided I was not worth your time. That is not true, she said. But her voice was shaking. It is, I said. And we both know it. She looked at me then. Really looked at me. And I saw fear in her eyes. Are you going to tell Arjun? She asked. I did not answer. Please, she said. Her voice was smaller now. Please do not tell him. It was a misunderstanding. I did not know. And that is the problem, I said. You did not know who I was. So you treated me like I did not matter. But the moment you realized I was someone important, you changed. That tells me everything I need to know. I walked toward the door. She followed me. Please, she said again. I am sorry. I turned back to look at her. Are you sorry for how you treated me? I asked. Or are you sorry that you got caught? She did not answer. I opened the door and stepped outside. The sunlight felt harsh. The air felt thick. Behind me I heard her voice. Shaky. Desperate. Please do not tell him. I did not turn around. I walked down the path. Through the gate. Onto the street. And this time I did not feel cold. I felt something else. Resolve. Because now I had seen it twice. And I knew it was not a mistake. It was not a bad day. It was who she was. And my son deserved to know the truth. But I also knew I could not just tell him. He needed to see it himself. So I began to think about how to make that happen. How to create a situation where her mask would slip in front of him. Where her true nature would be revealed not by my words but by her own actions. And slowly a plan began to form. It would take time. It would take patience. It would take careful strategy. But I was willing to do whatever it took. Because this was not just about me anymore. This was about protecting my son from a life of pretense. This was about standing up for every invisible person she had ever dismissed. And this was about teaching her a lesson she would never forget. Over the next few weeks, I continued my quiet observation. I did not visit again. I did not confront her. I simply watched. I watched from a distance. I began asking questions. Subtle questions. to people who knew her, to people who worked for her, to neighbors. And what I learned broke my heart even further. The maid finally opened up to me one afternoon. I had called her aside when she came to my house to deliver something Arjun had sent. I asked her gently how things were going. She looked around nervously. Then she spoke in a low voice. "Madam is very strict," she said. "Strict how?" I asked. "She gets angry if things are not perfect. She shouts. She does not like to pay on time. She finds reasons to cut from my salary." I felt anger rise in my chest. "Has she ever been kind to you?" I asked. The girl looked down. "Only when Sir is home," she said quietly. I thanked her and let her go. But my mind was reeling. I spoke to the cook as well. He told me similar things. Kavya was demanding, impatient. She spoke to him as if he were invisible unless she needed something. And then I spoke to a neighbor, an older woman who lived 2 houses down. She told me something that made my blood run cold. One day she said there was a beggar woman who came to the gate. She was old, frail. She asked for some food. "I saw your daughter-in-law come to the door." The beggar woman folded her hands and asked humbly. "But your daughter-in-law did not even look at her. She shouted at her to go away. She said beggars should not come to this neighborhood. She threatened to call the police." The neighbor shook her head sadly. The old woman left with tears in her eyes. I sat in silence after hearing that. This was worse than I thought. Kavya was not just dismissive of people she considered beneath her. She was cruel. And she did it all with a smile on her face when the right people were watching. I knew I had to act. But I also knew I had to be smart. So I planned something. A family gathering. I would host a dinner at my home. I would invite Arjun and Kavya. I would also invite some relatives and friends. A mix of people. Some wealthy, some not. And I would watch how she behaved. I would create situations where her mask would slip. And I would make sure Arjun was paying attention. So I called him one evening. "Beta," I said. "I want to have a small family dinner. It has been so long since we all sat together." He sounded happy. "That is a great idea, Ma." "When?" "This Saturday," I said. "Perfect. I will tell Kavya." "Good," I said. "And please invite a few people from your side as well. I want it to be a warm gathering." He agreed. I spent the next few days preparing. I cooked his favorite dishes. I cleaned the house. I set the table beautifully. But I also made sure to invite certain people. I invited Lakshmi, my old friend, the retired teacher with no wealth. I invited the young maid from their house. I told her I needed help serving and I would pay her extra. I invited a distant relative who was a farmer. Simple, humble, kind. And I invited some of Arjun's wealthier colleagues as well. A mix. Saturday came. I dressed simply again. Not too plain, but not extravagant. I wanted to see how Kavya would react to me in this setting. Guests started arriving in the evening. Arjun and Kavya came together. She was dressed beautifully. A designer sari. Perfect makeup. Jewelry that sparkled. She greeted me warmly when she arrived. "Ma, the house looks lovely," she said with a bright smile. "Thank you, Beta," I said. She hugged me, touched my feet, played the part perfectly. Then the other guests began to arrive. When Arjun's wealthy colleague walked in, Kavya lit up. She greeted him with enthusiasm. She asked about his family. She laughed at his jokes. She offered him the best seat. When Lakshmi arrived, Kavya's smile thinned. She greeted her politely but briefly. Then she turned her attention back to the colleague. When the farmer relative walked in wearing simple clothes and worn sandals, Kavya barely acknowledged him. She gave a small nod and looked away. I watched it all. So did Arjun. Though I do not think he noticed the difference yet. We all sat down for dinner. The table was full. The conversation was lively. Kavya sat next to Arjun. She was charming, engaging. She spoke confidently about art and travel and business. But I noticed how she directed all her attention to the wealthier guests. She barely spoke to Lakshmi. She ignored the farmer relative completely. At one point, Lakshmi asked Kavya a question about her work. Kavya answered briefly, almost dismissively. Then she turned back to the colleague and continued a different conversation. Lakshmi looked hurt, but she said nothing. I felt my jaw tighten. Then the maid came in to serve more food. She was nervous. I could see her hands shaking slightly. She leaned over to place a dish on the table. But as she did, her elbow accidentally brushed against Kavya's shoulder. Kavya turned sharply. "Can you be more careful?" she snapped. The room went quiet. The maid froze. "Sorry, madam," she whispered. Kavya waved her hand in annoyance. "Just go. You are clumsy." The girl hurried back to the kitchen, her face red with shame. I looked at Arjun. He was frowning slightly, but he said nothing. The conversation resumed, but the mood had shifted. Later in the evening, I asked the maid to bring out dessert. She came in carrying a tray of sweets. She placed it on the table carefully. Kavya looked at the sweets and wrinkled her nose. "These look very homemade," she said, almost like a criticism. "They are homemade," I said calmly. "I made them." She blinked, realizing her mistake. "Oh," she said quickly. "I mean, they look authentic, traditional." But the damage was done. The insult was clear. Lakshmi looked uncomfortable. The farmer relative looked down at his plate. Arjun looked confused. After dessert, some of the guests began to leave. Lakshmi came to say goodbye. She hugged me and thanked me for the meal. Kavya stood nearby. She did not say goodbye to Lakshmi. She was already talking to someone else. I walked Lakshmi to the door. She looked at me with sad eyes. "Your daughter-in-law is very focused on certain people," she said quietly. "I know," I said. After all the guests left, Arjun and Kavya stayed to help clean up. Kavya was cheerful again. She complimented the evening. She said it was wonderful. But I could see the cracks now. And I knew Arjun had seen something too. Because later, when they were about to leave, he pulled me aside. "Ma," he said quietly. "Was everything okay tonight?" "What do you mean, Beta?" I asked. "I do not know." Kavya seemed a little sharp with the help. And with some of the guests. I looked at him carefully. "Did it bother you?" I asked. He hesitated. "A little," he admitted. "She is usually not like that." "Maybe she was tired," I said, testing him. He nodded slowly. "Maybe." But I could see doubt in his eyes. And that doubt was all I needed. The seed had been planted. Now I just needed to water it. The dinner had changed something. I could feel it. Arjun started asking questions. Small questions. Casual questions. But questions nonetheless. A few days after the dinner, he called me. "Ma," he said. "Did Kavya ever say anything to you about the maid?" "What do you mean?" I asked. "I do not know. I just noticed she is a little harsh with her sometimes." I chose my words carefully. "People have different management styles, Beta," I said. But he was not convinced. "It feels like more than that," he said. "Like she talks down to her." I stayed silent, letting him think. "Do you think I am imagining it?" he asked. "I do not think you are imagining anything," I said gently. "I think you are noticing." There was a pause. "I do not want to be unfair to her," he said. "But something feels off." "Trust your instincts," I said. We ended the call. But I knew his mind was working. Over the next week, I continued to gather information. I spoke to more people. I listened carefully. And I learned something important. Kavya had been rude to several people in the neighborhood. Shopkeepers, delivery workers, even a schoolteacher who lived nearby. Everyone had a story. But no one said anything publicly because she was charming to those who mattered. She maintained her image well. But the invisible people, the ones she dismissed, they knew who she really was. And I realized something. I was not the only one who had been tested. She had been testing everyone all along. Testing who deserved her respect, who deserved her kindness, who was worth her time. And she had decided that only those with power and status made the cut. Everyone else was disposable. I also learned that Arjun had started noticing more at home. The maid told me quietly that he had asked her if everything was all right. He had noticed that Kavya spoke to her differently when he was not around. He had noticed the tension. And he was starting to question. I knew this was my moment. But I had to be careful. I could not push too hard. I could not seem like I was interfering. I had to let him discover the truth on his own. So I did something subtle. I invited Kavya to lunch. Just the two of us. I told her I wanted to spend time with her. To talk. To understand her better. She agreed. Though I could tell she was hesitant. We met at a small restaurant. Nothing fancy. A quiet place. She arrived looking polished as always. We ordered food and made small talk. Then I asked her a question. Kavya, I said gently. Do you remember the first time we met? Of course, she said, smiling. I was so nervous. You were wonderful, I said. You made me feel like you truly cared. I did, she said. I do. I nodded slowly. Then I asked. Do you think kindness should be the same for everyone? She looked at me. Confusion flickering in her eyes. What do you mean? Should we treat everyone with the same respect? Or should we treat people differently based on who they are? She hesitated. Well, she said slowly. I think we should be respectful to everyone. But obviously we behave differently with different people. Why, I asked. She blinked. Because that is just how it is. You do not talk to your boss the same way you talk to a servant. But why, I pressed. Why should respect be conditional? It is not conditional, she said. But there are hierarchies. There are social structures. And those structures determine who deserves our kindness, I asked. She was getting uncomfortable now. I did not say that. But you believe it, I said quietly. She looked away. I just think people should know their place. The words hung in the air. I felt a deep sadness settle over me. Because there it was. The core belief that had been guiding all her actions. People should know their place. And she had appointed herself the judge of where everyone belonged. I did not argue with her. I did not lecture. I simply paid for the meal and we parted ways. But now I knew exactly what I was dealing with. And I knew what had to be done. That evening I called Arjun. Beta, I said. I need to talk to you about something important. What is it, Ma? I need you to pay attention to how Kavya treats people. Not just you. Not just me. But everyone. He was quiet for a moment. Why are you saying this? Because I think you need to see something I have been seeing. What have you been seeing? I did not answer directly. Just watch, I said. Pay attention. And then we will talk. He agreed. Though I could hear the worry in his voice. Over the next 2 weeks Arjun started observing. He told me later what he saw. He saw Kavya snap at the cook for a minor mistake. He saw her ignore a delivery worker who greeted her politely. He saw her treat his less wealthy friends with coolness while fawning over his wealthier colleagues. And he started to feel sick. Because he realized he had been blind. He had been so in love with the version of her she showed him that he never looked beyond it. But now he could not unsee it. And one day he called me. His voice was heavy. Ma, he said. I think you were right. About what, Beta? About Kavya. About how she treats people. I stayed silent, letting him continue. She is different when she thinks I am not watching. She is cold. Dismissive. She only cares about people who can do something for her. I am sorry, Beta, I said softly. Why did I not see it before, he asked. His voice was breaking. Because you saw what you wanted to see, I said. And because she is very good at hiding it. What do I do now, he asked. That is up to you, I said. But you need to decide what kind of person you want to spend your life with. And what kind of home you want to build. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I need to talk to her. Yes, I said. You do. And that is when I knew. The power had shifted. Kavya no longer controlled the narrative. The truth was coming to light. And there was no going back. Arjun decided to confront her. But I suggested something different. Do not confront her privately, I said. She will deny it. She will make excuses. She will turn it around on you. Then what should I do, he asked. Let her reveal herself, I said. In front of people. In a situation where she cannot hide. He thought about it. Another family dinner, I said. But this time I will be there as myself. Fully. And I will create situations where she has to show who she really is. He was hesitant. That feels like a trap. It is not a trap, I said gently. It is simply the truth being given space to emerge. He finally agreed. So I planned it carefully. I hosted another dinner. This time I invited even more people. Family members from both sides. Friends. Colleagues. A real gathering. And I made sure to invite the same mix of people as before. Wealthy and humble. Powerful and ordinary. I also told Arjun to watch. To really watch. The night of the dinner arrived. I dressed in one of my finest saris. Gold jewelry. The full presence of who I was. Guests began arriving. Kavya came with Arjun. She looked stunning. Confident. She greeted me warmly. Ma, you look beautiful, she said. Thank you, Beta, I said. She moved through the room greeting people. I watched her carefully. She was performing again. Charming with the influential guests. Polite but distant with everyone else. Then I did something deliberate. I called the maid over. The same girl who had worked in their home. Beta, I said to Kavya. This young woman has been so helpful. I wanted to thank her publicly. Kavya's smile faltered for just a moment. Oh, she said. That is nice. I turned to the maid. Please tell everyone your name, I said. The girl looked nervous. My name is Ronnie, she said quietly. Ronnie has been working very hard, I said. She deserves our appreciation. Some of the guests clapped politely. Kavya looked uncomfortable. Then I invited Ronnie to sit with us for a moment. Come, Beta, I said. You have been on your feet all evening. Rest for a minute. Ronnie looked shocked. But she sat down hesitantly at the edge of the gathering. Kavya's face tightened. She did not say anything. But I could see the displeasure. Then I turned to the farmer relative who was sitting quietly in the corner. Uncle, I called out. Come sit here. I want to hear about your harvest this year. He smiled shyly and came over. Kavya was now visibly tense. She did not like this mixing of social circles. It offended her sense of order. I continued. I think it is important to recognize that every person here has value, I said to the room. Whether they are wealthy or humble, educated or simple, every person deserves our respect. Some people nodded. Kavya forced a smile. Of course, she said. Everyone is valuable. Then I looked directly at her. Do you really believe that, Kavya? I asked gently. The room went quiet. She blinked. Of course I do, she said. Her voice was a little too bright. Then why do you treat people so differently? I asked. Her face paled. I do not, she said quickly. You do, I said. I have seen it. And so have others. She looked around. Panic flickering in her eyes. Arjun was watching her closely. I turned to Ronnie. Ronnie, I said. Please tell everyone how Kavya treats you when no one is watching. Ronnie looked terrified. Madam, she whispered. I cannot. You can, I said firmly. And you should. Because silence only protects those who do wrong. Ronnie looked at Kavya. Then at me. Then slowly she spoke. She shouts at me, she said quietly. She cuts my salary for small mistakes. She never says thank you. She treats me like I am invisible. The room was silent. Kavya's face was red. That is not true, she said. Her voice was shaking. She is exaggerating. I turned to the cook who was standing near the kitchen. And you, I said. What is your experience? He hesitated. Then he spoke. She is very harsh, madam. She does not respect us. Kavya stood up. This is ridiculous, she said. You are turning everyone against me. I am not turning anyone, I said calmly. I am simply giving voice to people you have silenced. She looked at Arjun. Are you going to let her do this? She demanded. He looked at her steadily. Is it true? He asked. What they are saying? Is it true? She opened her mouth. Closed it. You do not understand, she said. They are just what he asked. Just servants. Just unimportant people. She froze. Because that is what she believed. And now it was out in the open. Arjun stood up. I have been watching you, he said quietly. 4 weeks now. And I have seen it too. The way you treat people. The way you decide who deserves your kindness. And I am ashamed. Tears filled her eyes. But I love you, she said. Do you? He asked. Or do you love what I can give you? She did not answer. I stood up as well. Kavya, I said. I gave you every chance. I watched you. I tested you. I hoped you would prove me wrong. She looked at me with shock. You tested me. Yes, I said. I came to your home dressed as an ordinary woman, and you treated me with nothing but contempt. You did not know I was your mother-in-law. You just saw someone you thought was beneath you. And you were cruel. Her eyes widened. That was you, she whispered. Yes. The room was completely silent. Everyone was watching. Kavya looked around, at the faces staring at her, at the judgment in their eyes. And then she did something I did not expect. She broke down. She collapsed into a chair and began to sob. I did not mean to, she cried. I just wanted to be respected. I wanted to be important. Respect is not something you demand, I said quietly. It is something you earn. And you earn it by giving it to others. She looked up at me, her face wet with tears. I am sorry, she whispered. I nodded. I hope you are, I said. But sorry was not enough. Because the damage was done. And everyone in that room now knew who she really was. The days after that dinner were heavy with silence. Kavya did not call me. Arjun did not call either. I waited. I knew they needed time to process what had happened. Finally, after almost a week, Arjun came to see me. He looked tired. His eyes were shadowed. Ma, he said quietly. Beta, I said. We sat together in silence for a long time. Then he spoke. I do not know what to do, he said. I feel like I do not know her at all. You are seeing her clearly now, I said. But I love her. I know. So what do I do? I took his hand. You decide what you can live with, Beta. You decide what kind of life you want. What kind of partner you want. What kind of home you want to build. He nodded slowly. She wants to talk, he said. She wants to apologize. That is good, I said. But apologies are just words. What matters is change. Do you think she can change, he asked. I do not know, I said honestly. Some people can. Some people cannot. He looked down. I feel so foolish, he said. I should have seen it. You loved her, I said. Love makes us blind sometimes. He looked at me. Did you ever like her, he asked. I wanted to, I said. I truly did. But I saw things that worried me. And I needed to know if those things were real. That is why you tested her. Yes. He was quiet. Thank you, he said finally. For what? For caring enough to find out the truth. I hugged him. Over the next few weeks, Kavya tried to make amends. She called me several times. She apologized. She cried. She said she wanted to change. I listened. But I did not make it easy for her. Because I needed to see if her remorse was real or just another performance. I told her that if she truly wanted to change, she needed to prove it. Not with words, but with actions. She needed to apologize to every person she had hurt. She needed to treat the help with respect and fairness. She needed to rebuild trust. And it would take time. She agreed. So I watched. And slowly, very slowly, I started to see small changes. She apologized to Ronnie, to the cook, to the neighbors she had been rude to. She started saying thank you. She started paying fairly. She started listening. It was not perfect. It was not immediate. But it was something. Arjun watched too. He told me he was cautiously hopeful. But he also told me he had set boundaries. He told Kavya that if she ever treated anyone with that kind of cruelty again, he would leave. And I believed he meant it. Because the boy I had raised, the man he had become, he had integrity. And he would not compromise on it. One evening Kavya came to see me alone. She sat across from me. Her face was different now. Less polished. More raw. Ma, she said. I know I hurt you. I know I hurt a lot of people. Yes, I said. I do not have an excuse, she said. I was wrong. I was arrogant. I thought respect was about power. But I understand now. Respect is about humanity. I looked at her carefully. Why did you think that way, I asked. She was quiet for a long time. Then she spoke. Because that is what I was taught, she said. Growing up. My parents. They always told me to associate with the right people. To stay away from those beneath us. I thought that was how the world worked. And now I asked. Now I see how much pain that belief caused. not just to others, but to myself. I nodded. Change is hard, Kavya, I said. But it is possible. If you truly want it. I do, she said. I really do. Then prove it, I said. Every day. With every action. With every word. I will, she said. Time would tell if she meant it. But I had done what I needed to do. I had uncovered the truth. I had protected my son. I had stood up for the invisible people. And I had taught a lesson that needed to be taught. Not through cruelty, but through consequence. Because sometimes the most powerful lessons are the ones we learn through pain. Months passed. The house slowly began to feel different. Kavya continued her efforts to change. Some days were better than others. Some days she slipped back into old habits. But Arjun held her accountable. And she tried. Ronnie told me she felt more respected. The cook said things had improved. Neighbors noticed the difference. It was not a perfect transformation, but it was real, and I began to believe that maybe, just maybe, Kavya could become the person she should have been all along. But I also knew that not every story ends in redemption. Some people choose to change. Some people choose to leave. And both are valid. One evening Arjun and Kavya invited me over for dinner. It was the first time I had been to their home since the unmasking. When I arrived, Kavya greeted me warmly. Genuinely. She had cooked the meal herself. She served me with care. She asked about my day. She listened. And I saw something different in her eyes. Humility. After dinner we sat together in the living room. Ma, Kavya said, I want to thank you. For what I asked. For not giving up on me. For holding me accountable. For teaching me something I should have learned a long time ago. I nodded. I did not do it to punish you, I said. I did it to protect the people you were hurting. Including my son. I know, she said. And I am grateful. Arjun reached over and took her hand. We are rebuilding, he said. It is not easy. But we are trying. I looked at them both. That is all anyone can do, I said. Try. Every day. To be better than we were yesterday. Kavya nodded. I want to be better, she said. Not for appearances. Not for status. But because it is right. I believed her. Or at least I wanted to. As I left that evening, I felt something I had not felt in a long time. Peace. Not because everything was perfect. But because the truth was finally in the open. Because the invisible people had been seen. Because my son knew the reality of the life he was building. And because I had done what I needed to do. I had not stayed silent. I had not looked away. I had not allowed cruelty to hide behind charm. I had stood up. And in doing so I had reclaimed my own voice. The weeks that followed were quieter. I returned to my own life. My own routines. My own peace. But I stayed watchful. Because trust once broken takes time to rebuild. And I owed it to my son to remain present. To remain aware. One afternoon Lakshmi came to visit me. She sat with me over tea and asked how things were. I told her everything. She listened quietly. Then she said something that stayed with me. You did a brave thing, she said. Most people would have stayed silent. Most people would have let it go. But you did not. And because of that many people were saved from suffering. I smiled. I did not do it for praise, I said. I did it because it was necessary. That is what makes it brave, she said. We sat in comfortable silence after that. And I realized something. I was not angry anymore. I was not hurt. I was simply at peace with the choices I had made. Because I had not acted out of bitterness or jealousy or control. I had acted out of love. Love for my son. Love for the values I believed in. Love for the people who had no voice. And that love had guided me through one of the hardest experiences of my life. As the sun set that evening, I stood on my balcony and looked out at the city. The lights were beginning to flicker on. The sky was turning shades of orange and pink. And I thought about all the invisible people in the world. The ones who work hard but are never seen. The ones who serve but are never thanked. The ones who give but are never valued. And I made a silent promise. I would never be one of those who looked past them. I would never be one of those who measured worth by wealth or status or power. I would see people, all people, as they deserve to be seen, with respect, with kindness, with humanity. Because that is what it means to live with integrity. And that is the legacy I wanted to leave behind. Not wealth. Not status. Not power. But a life lived with dignity and compassion. A life where every person mattered. Where every voice was heard. Where kindness was not conditional. That was the world I wanted to build. And I knew now that it started with small actions. With standing up when something was wrong. With speaking when others were silenced. With choosing truth over comfort. I did not know what the future held for Arjun and Kavya. I did not know if their marriage would survive. I did not know if Kavya would continue to grow or slip back into old patterns. But I knew one thing. I had done my part. I had loved fiercely. I had acted bravely. I had honored the values I believed in. And whatever came next, I would face it with the same strength and clarity that had carried me this far. Because I was no longer invisible. And neither was anyone else. Not on my watch. This is a story about more than just family conflict. It is about how we see people. How we treat them. How we decide who matters. It is about the masks we wear and the truth that always finds a way to surface. It is about the courage to stand up even when it is uncomfortable. And it is about the quiet power of a woman who refuses to be silenced. May we all have the strength to see beyond appearances. May we all have the wisdom to value people for who they are, not what they can give us. And may we all have the courage to speak truth even when it costs us something. Because in the end the only thing that matters is how we loved. How we stood up for what was right. And how we treated the invisible ones among us. That is the measure of a life well lived. And that is a legacy worth leaving behind.